The first time Dara noticed the dragon, it was because she almost stepped on it. She had been carrying a stack of supply manifests down Corridor 9, head down, eyes on the paper, when her boot stopped half an inch from a small coiled body sitting directly in the middle of the floor. She looked down. The creature looked up. Neither of them moved for a moment. It was about the size of a large house cat. Its scales were blue and gold, shifting between the two colors the way oil shifts on water. Small wings sat folded tight against its back. Its eyes were a pale amber, almost white, and they did not blink for a very long time. Then it looked away from her, turned its head back toward the door behind it, and went still again. Dara stepped around it and kept walking. That was 6 weeks ago. Now she walked Corridor 9 every single day, and every single day the dragon was there. Same spot, same posture, facing the same door. Chamber 14. A sealed auxiliary room that the station manifest listed as empty storage, cleared 7 months ago, no contents, no access required. The station's other crew had long stopped seeing it. The dragon was just part of the corridor now, like the ventilation grate above it or the scuff marks on the floor panel beside it. The Velianites, that was the species name, though most of the crew just called them pocket dragons, were not unusual on Varen's Reach. A few lived in the upper decks. They kept to themselves. They were harmless. Nobody gave them much thought. Dara gave them thought. She was a logistics officer, which meant her entire job was noticing things that did not fit. A shipment 2 kilos short. A transfer scheduled on a day when the docking bay was already at capacity. A supply request for materials that had no listed project attached. Small wrongness. That was her specialty. And this dragon was small wrongness in a shape she could not name yet. She crouched down in front of it one afternoon and set her manifests on the floor beside her. The dragon's scales shifted color. More gold than blue now. It did not move away from her, but it did not look at her either. Its full attention was on the door. "You know that room is empty," she said, not expecting an answer, just thinking out loud. The dragon made a sound. Low. So low she felt it more in her chest than heard it with her ears. A hum that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside the small body, resonant and steady, like a held note on an instrument she had never learned the name of. She had heard Velianites hum before. It was how they communicated, layers of frequency and tone that their own linguists spent years studying. She did not know what this one meant, but she noticed that it was not a frightened sound. It was not a warning sound. It sounded, if she had to put words to it, like something that was holding on. She stood up, picked up her manifests, continued down the corridor. Mira Soldano was waiting for her at the junction. Mira was the station medic, and she had the easy confidence of someone who had seen enough strange things that very little surprised her anymore. She fell into step beside Dara without being asked, which was her way. "You stopped at the dragon again," Mira said. "I stop at a lot of things. You stopped for 4 minutes. I was timing you." Dara did not answer right away. They walked through the junction and into the wider main corridor, where the lighting was better and the hum of other crew members and distant machinery replaced the quiet of Corridor 9. "It's not nesting," Dara said finally. "Pocket dragons nest in corners, in vents, in soft places." She looked back over her shoulder, even though the corridor was behind them and nothing was visible. Not in the middle of a floor in front of a sealed door. Mira shrugged. "Maybe it likes the door. It's been there for weeks. Maybe longer. Nobody clocked when it started. Animals do repetitive things. It does not mean anything." Dara thought about the hum, about the way the dragon had not looked at her, had not looked away from the door, about the weight of attention in that small body, and how it felt less like instinct and more like choice. "Sure," she said. She did not mean it. That night, back at her station terminal, she pulled up the record for Chamber 14. Sealed 7 months ago. Routine clearance. No flagged contents. No current access hold beyond standard lock protocol. Everything correct. Everything normal. She sat with it for a while. Then she noted the corridor's life support draw, just for reference, and filed it away in the back of her mind where she kept all the things that did not fit yet. The dragon was still there when she walked past the next morning. It did not look at her. It did not move. But as she passed the door, she slowed her step just slightly, and in the quiet of the corridor, with the ventilation low and the other sounds of the station distant, she listened. Nothing. She kept walking. But she came back the next day, and the day after that, Because that was the thing about small wrongness. It did not go away just because you walked past it. It sat there, quiet and patient, until someone finally stopped long enough to ask the right question. The dragon already knew the answer. Dara was getting closer. The number was wrong by 0.003%. That was how small it was. A rounding error. A ghost in the data. The kind of thing every automated system on the station would skip over without a second flag, because 0.003% was within acceptable variance for corridor life support draws in a low-traffic section. Dara stared at it for a long time. She had pulled the energy consumption logs for Corridor 9 as part of a routine quarterly check, the kind of background work that nobody assigned her and nobody noticed she did. She ran these checks the way some people kept their shoes clean, out of habit, out of the belief that details mattered before they became problems. The draw on Corridor 9 was slightly higher than it should have been for a corridor with no occupied chambers. Not much, not enough to alarm anyone, but the draw had been consistent for 7 months. Every day, every hour, never spiking, never dropping, steady as a heartbeat, steady as something alive maintaining itself. She ran the figures twice, then a third time with a different baseline. The result did not change. She tried to access Chamber 14's internal sensor log next. Environmental readings, temperature, air cycling history. She typed in her clearance code and waited. Access denied. Administrative hold. Coalition Intelligence Authority. Dated 7 months ago. She sat back in her chair. Intelligence holds were not common on Varen's Reach. This was a way station, not a military installation. They processed cargo transfers, managed species transit documentation, ran supply chains for 3 neighboring systems. Intelligence had a presence on most coalition stations, but they rarely put hard locks on individual rooms without a reason. 7 months. Same time as the life support irregularity started. Same time, she realized, as the dragon had appeared. She had no way to know exactly when Sori had arrived. Nobody had logged it, because nobody logged where Velianite sat, but she had asked 2 crewmates that afternoon, casually, while pulling a water packet from the break room dispenser. Both of them said the same thing. The dragon had been there since before they could remember paying attention to it. Months, at least. 7 months. All 3 things lined up like points on a map. Dara found Mira in the medical bay, finishing an inventory of wound sealant. I need to tell you something, Dara said. Mira set down her scanner. She had a way of going still when she was about to hear something she would rather not. She did it now. Dara laid it out simply. The life support draw, the intelligence hold, the timeline matching the dragon's appearance. When she finished, Mira was quiet for a moment. Dara, her voice was careful. You should let this one go. The numbers do not lie. The numbers are within acceptable variance. You said so yourself. For a single reading. Not for 7 months of identical readings in an empty room. Mira looked at her steadily. Coalition intelligence clearance is not something we step into without very good reason. If they put a hold on that room, there is a process for challenging it. A formal process. Through channels. Not through a logistics officer pulling consumption logs at night. I know that. Do you? Dar did not answer that. She thanked Mira and left. She went back to Corridor 9 alone. It was late shift. The corridor was empty of crew. The overhead lights had cycled to dim blue for the night rotation. Sori was still there, still coiled in the same spot. And in the low blue light the dragon's scales looked almost entirely gold, the blue gone to something darker underneath. Dara sat down on the floor of the corridor, cross-legged, back against the opposite wall, facing the door and the dragon both. Sori did not look at her. The amber eyes were fixed forward, but the hum started almost immediately, low and resonant, filling the corridor with that deep vibration that had no good word in any human language Dara knew. She listened to it for a while. Then she leaned sideways until her ear was close to the seam of the door. And she heard it. Slow, shallow, the unmistakable rhythm of air moving in and out of a living body. Not a machine cycle, not a ventilation pulse, not her own breath, because she was holding that, breathing. Someone was inside that room. Someone had been inside that room for 7 months. Someone was alive in there, surviving on whatever was available, sealed in behind an intelligence hold that nobody was supposed to question. And the only reason Dara knew was because a small dragon had refused to leave the door. She pulled back from the wall slowly, carefully, making no sound. Her hands were very still. Her face was very still. On the inside, something had shifted into a place that felt like cold certainty. She looked at Sori. The dragon's scales rippled, gold to blue to gold again. Its eyes moved, just slightly, to meet hers. Just for a second. Then it looked back at the door. Dara sat in the corridor for a while longer. She was not afraid. She was not panicking. She was doing what she always did when she found something that did not fit. She was thinking about what came next. Because now she knew. And knowing changed everything. The question was no longer whether something was wrong. The question was what a logistics officer on a mid-tier way station could do about it without getting quietly reassigned to the outer freight runs. She had some ideas. She pulled out her work tablet, opened a blank document, and started with the one thing she knew how to use better than anything else. She started writing down what she had found, in order, with timestamps and source references. Sori's hum continued beside her, steady and low, like something that had been waiting a very long time for someone to finally sit down and listen. Redacted documents have a shape. That was something Dara had learned early in her career, back when she had processed disputed cargo manifests for a border freight company and learned that what was missing from a record told you almost as much as what remained. A line of black, a date with no entry attached, a reference number pointing to a file that no longer existed in the accessible system. These were not blanks. They were answers in a different language. She spent 2 full days in the records room, working through every legitimate channel available to her clearance level. The room was small and smelled of recycled air. She did not leave it much. She ate at the terminal. The intelligence hold on Chamber 14 was logged under a case identifier that, when she cross-referenced it through the Coalition Administrative Index, connected to a border incident report dated 7 months and 4 days ago. The incident report itself was almost entirely black. Title, redacted. Location, redacted. Involved parties, redacted, except for one field that had not been fully cleared. Species classification of witness, non-human, protected status, pending tribunal. Witness, not suspect, not detainee. Witness. She kept going. Transfer documentation linked to the case identifier showed a scheduled movement, a transfer to a secure tribunal facility, logged and then never completed. No cancellation record. No rescheduling. It had simply stopped existing in the active file system and moved to archive, where it sat, untouched, for 7 months. Someone had been placed in Chamber 14 to await transfer. The transfer had never come, and at some point, the people responsible for making it happen had moved on to other things, and the file had gone quiet, and the person inside had gone with it. Not killed, not released, forgotten. Dara sat with that for a long time. Then she went to find Rael. The Velianite linguist lived in a small office near the translation archive in the station's upper level. The office was warm and cluttered with language reference materials in 17 formats, from printed physical text to data chip stacks. Rael was elderly by Velianite standards, which meant the blue-gold scales had faded to something softer, almost silver at the edges, and the movements were slow and deliberate. Rael communicated through a translation interface, a small device on the desk that converted Velianite resonance tones into spoken language. Dara explained what she wanted to know. Not the room, not the case, just the behavior. What it meant when a Velianite positioned itself outside a place and did not leave. Rael was quiet for a while. The silver-edged scales shifted slowly. The translation interface spoke in a calm, neutral voice. You are describing a ward hold. It is not a common behavior. It is not instinct. What is it then? Choice, the interface said. A Velianite in ward hold has decided that a specific living being requires presence. Continuity of presence. It is a pause while Rael selected something. The closest concept in your language would be vigil. To sit with someone who cannot be left alone. Dara felt something settle in her chest. Cold and clear. The room isn't empty. If Sori is in ward hold at that door, Rael said through the interface, then there is someone inside that room who Sori has decided must not be abandoned. How long can a Velianite hold a ward position? Another pause. As long as necessary. There are records of ward holds lasting years. They will not eat much. They will not sleep in the way you sleep. They will not leave. It is, Rael's scales shifted. It is the most serious thing a Velianite can do. It means, I will not let you be forgotten. For as long as I am here, you are known. Dara thanked Rail. She left the office and stood in the corridor outside for a moment, staring at nothing. 7 months. Sori had been sitting outside that door for 7 months, holding a ward position for someone sealed inside. Someone the station had forgotten. Someone whose transfer paperwork had drifted into an archive and stopped matching to anyone with the authority to act. Anyone except a small dragon who could not open doors or file reports or speak a single word of any coalition language. Governor Sean Abuta's message reached Dara's terminal that evening. A summons. Polite in wording, not optional in tone. The governor's office was large enough to feel like a statement. Abutu was a broad-shouldered person who wore authority the way some people wore comfortable clothing, naturally, without thinking about it. They looked tired. You have been accessing intelligence-adjacent records, Abutu said. Not an accusation. A fact being placed on the table. I accessed everything within my clearance level, Dara said. You accessed the shape of things outside your clearance level. Dara did not answer. Abutu looked at her for a long moment. This situation is politically complicated. There are parties involved who have significant standing with Coalition Command. I am telling you this not to threaten you, but because I want you to understand what you are stepping toward. Someone is in that room, Dara said. The governor's expression did not change, but something behind the eyes shifted, a discomfort that had been there a long time. I am asking you to use the correct channels, Abutu said quietly. If such channels exist and are used correctly, I will not stand in the way. That was not nothing. Dara recognized it for what it was, a door left unlocked by someone who could not open it themselves. She left the office and walked directly to Corridor 9. Sori was there. The hum started before she was even close, low and resonant and steady, as it had been every day for 7 months. Dara crouched down in front of the small dragon and looked at it seriously. I know what you're doing, she said. I know why. Sori's scales rippled, gold, bright and full, washing over the blue completely for one long moment. Then the amber eyes held hers, and the hum changed, just slightly, just enough that Dara felt, without being able to explain it, that she was being seen. She stood up, straightened her jacket, picked up her work tablet. She had a welfare inquiry to file, and she was going to do it so correctly, so completely, so thoroughly documented, that no intelligence clearance in the coalition was going to make it disappear into an archive and go quiet. Not this time. Dara did not touch the lock. She had thought about it. She knew 3 crew members who could bypass a standard station seal without leaving a trace, and one of them owed her a favor from a supply rerouting she had quietly fixed 2 years ago. It would have been easy. It would have taken 11 minutes. She did not do it because easy was not the same as right, and more importantly, easy was not the same as lasting. If she broke the seal, whatever she found inside became evidence obtained through breach of protocol and costs. The intelligence officer whose clearance stamp was on that 7-month-old hold would bury it before the day was done. So instead, she filed a formal welfare inquiry under Coalition Humanitarian Code, Section 7, Clause 3, mandatory welfare inspection of any sealed station space where independent sensor data suggested active life support draw inconsistent with log vacancy. She attached the consumption logs. She attached the timestamps. She attached the access denial she had received when trying to view the internal sensors. She filed it through the station's administrative system, which automatically copied it to the Coalition Humanitarian Oversight Board on the regional relay. Then she walked to the medical bay and put a data chip on Myra's desk. Co-sign it, she said. You are a medical officer. Your signature makes it a medical welfare inquiry, which is a different tier of urgency than a logistics inquiry. Mira read the filing in silence. Her face went through several things. You know what this is going to bring down. Co-sign it. Mira signed it. Koss arrived within the hour. He was a tall man, thin in the way that suggested he had always been thin and was proud of it. His uniform was coalition standard, but wore like something more formal. He had the particular stillness of someone who had learned that moving less made other people more nervous. This inquiry is premature, he said, standing in the medical bay doorway. The hold on Chamber 14 is active intelligence authority. A welfare filing does not supersede that. Section 7, Clause 3 does not require superseding authority, Mira said. and her voice was the steady voice she used when she had already decided. It requires access for the purpose of determining whether life is at risk. That determination sits entirely within medical jurisdiction. There is no life at risk. The room is empty. Then a welfare check will confirm that quickly, and we'll all go home, Dara said. Unless there's a reason you'd prefer we didn't look. Koss looked at her for a long moment. His expression did not change. You are creating a situation that will follow you. That's fine, Dara said. Open the door. Governor Abutu arrived 2 minutes later, which meant the governor had been watching. Abutu looked at Koss and said, simply, the inquiry is properly filed and co-signed by a medical officer. I am authorizing access. Koss said nothing. He held the silence for as long as he could, and then he typed the override code into the wall panel. The lock disengaged with a soft mechanical click. The door to chamber 14 opened. The smell reached them first. Stale air. Clothes and recycled. The sharp, faintly metallic smell of a space that had been breathing only itself for a very long time. The room was dim. The emergency lighting had been set low, conserving power. Along the far wall, surrounded by the flattened remains of empty ration packaging and a small pile of station-issue thermal sheeting, was a person. A Davari. Young. Slender, as Davari were, with the long four-fingered hands and the fine, hairless gray skin and the large eyes that caught the light from the doorway and went wide with something that was not quite recognition and not quite hope. Something between them, fragile as a held breath. Oren, the name from the partial record. The witness. He was thin, not dangerously so, but the kind of thin that came from months of rationing. He had used everything the room had provided him. Ration stores, water reclamation unit, the emergency thermal supplies, carefully and slowly, making it last. He had survived by being very careful and very patient. He had not signaled for help. Not once. Because he had been told to wait. Because the people who put him there had told him a transfer was coming. And he had waited and waited, and at some point he had stopped believing it was coming, but had no safe way out and no one to call. He looked at the people in the doorway. He looked at Koss, and his whole body tightened. Then Sori moved. The dragon slipped through the gap between Dara's legs and entered the room, and the hum it emitted changed entirely. The low guarding tone was gone. What replaced it was something warmer and fuller, layered frequencies that resonated in the chest and the bones, a sound like relief expressed as music, like something long held finally set down. Sori crossed the room and settled against Oren's side. Oren made a sound. Not words, just a sound. And then he was crying, quietly, with his four-fingered hand resting on the small, iridescent body of the dragon that had been outside his door every single day for 7 months and somehow, through a sealed wall and a bureaucratic silence, had made him feel less alone. Dara stood at the doorway and did not move for a moment. She had found broken supply chains. She had found mislabeled cargo and missing transfers and accounting errors that masked something worse underneath. She had spent years finding the things that did not fit. She had never found anything like this. She looked at Koss. He was looking at the floor. Get a medical team, she said to Mira. Mira was already calling one. Dara stepped into the room. She crouched down a few feet from Oren, low and slow, not crowding him. She spoke quietly. My name is Dara. You're safe. We're going to get you out of here. Oren looked at her. The large eyes were wet. After a moment, he nodded. Just once. Small and exhausted. Sori's hum filled the room. Warm and resonant and unbroken. It sounded, Dara thought, like something that had finally been allowed to breathe. Koss made his move before Oren had finished his first cup of water in the medical bay. Dara had expected this. She had been standing just outside the bay, back against the wall, tablet in hand, when Koss appeared in the corridor with 2 station security officers and a transfer authorization that he had generated somewhere between the moment the door opened and the moment the medical team arrived. The individual is to be returned to secured holding pending a review of his status, Koss said. He held the authorization out to Dara as though she were the relevant person to convince, which told her something about how much attention he had paid to her specifically. Dara did not take the document. She looked past him at the security officers, both of whom looked like they would genuinely prefer to be anywhere else. Oren is currently under active medical assessment, she said. Mira Soldano admitted him to the medical bay 40 minutes ago. Under Coalition Station Code, a patient in active medical care is in medical custody, not intelligence custody, until the treating officer clears him. That's not a suggestion. That's a code that predates this station. Koss's jaw was very still. I am not interested in a code argument. That's fine. You don't have to be interested. The code still applies. She turned and went back inside. Mira had heard all of it. She met Dara's eyes and gave a short nod. Oren was in the bay bed, Sori tucked against his side, and the medical monitors were running their baseline assessment. Mira had made sure to begin that assessment the moment he arrived, with full timestamps logged. Medical custody was airtight. Koss could not touch it without going through the Coalition Medical Ethics Board, which would take time he clearly did not want to spend. Dara sat down at the small desk in the corner of the bay and opened her filing system. She started with the welfare violation report. 7 months of unauthorized indefinite detention of a coalition-protected witness, without completing the required transfer, without logging welfare checks at the mandated intervals, without notifying the relevant tribunal of the continued hold. She cited every regulation by number. She attached every piece of supporting data she had gathered over the past week. She cross-referenced the life support logs, the redacted transfer documentation, the access denial she had received, the date stamp on the original intelligence hold. She wrote it in clear, plain language with no room for interpretation. Then she filed it to the Coalition Humanitarian Oversight Board, the Coalition Legal Standards Office, the Regional Station Governance Board, and, after a moment of thought, the Coalition Witness Protection Directorate, because Oren was a protected witness and the directorate had its own authority and its own reasons to be unhappy about what had happened. She filed the missing transfer documentation complaint separately. A scheduled transfer that had never been completed and never been formally canceled was a procedural failure with its own code violations. She filed the sensor access denial as a third document. An intelligence clearance hold was permitted. Using it to block a welfare inquiry was not. She filed them all with timestamps and full documentation chains and copied every single one to station record, which meant they could not be quietly archived. Station records were permanent and auditable. Koss appeared in the doorway again, 2 hours later. He looked at her for a long time. "You understand what you are doing," he said. It was not a question. "I do. This implicates people with significant standing. I imagine it does. You will not come out of this without enemies." Dara set her tablet down and looked at him directly. He was already in that room. Someone just needed to open the door. Koss left. Governor Abutu came to the medical bay that evening. The governor did not sit, just stood at the door and looked at Oren, who had eaten a real meal for the first time in weeks and was sleeping with Sori curled on the blanket beside him. The dragon scales were cycling slowly between blue and gold in the dim light, and the hum it made was very quiet now, more felt than heard. "You have made this a matter of record," Abutu said to Dara. Not angry, almost relieved. "Yes. I will be notifying Coalition Command formally tomorrow that this station cannot manage the situation internally and that external review is required." The governor paused. "That notification will make it impossible for this to be resolved quietly." "I know." Abutu looked at her for a moment. "You knew I would do that. I thought you might. When you told me to use correct channels, you left the door unlocked." The governor's expression was complicated. The border incident Oren witnessed involved Coalition Command personnel, senior ones. That is why the file was buried. "It won't stay buried now," Dara said. "No." Abutu looked at the sleeping Davari one more time. "No, it will not." Rael came the next day and sat with Oren for several hours, speaking in Velionite resonance that the translation interface rendered into quiet Davari words. Oren and Sori had met once before the incident, briefly, at a transit hub, months before Oren had witnessed what he witnessed and found himself suddenly, terrifyingly valuable to people who wanted him silent. Sori had followed him the day the intelligence officers took him to the room. Just followed, small and quiet and beneath notice, and settled outside the door. And stayed. The Coalition Witness Protection Directorate responded to Dara's filing within 36 hours. Oren was reclassified from indefinite hold to protected witness with active status, which meant the tribunal was legally required to convene within 90 days. The border incident investigation was reopened. Koss was reassigned. Nobody announced it. He was simply gone one morning, and the office he had used was empty. She kept walking. There was a supply manifest due by afternoon and 3 transfer requests she had not logged yet, and the station's quarterly consumption review was not going to file itself. She had a lot of work to do. She was already doing it. 3 weeks later, the station felt different. Not in any way that showed up on a manifest. The cargo routes were the same. The crew rotations were the same. The ventilation still hummed at its standard frequency, and the lights still cycled through their 3 daily phases, and the supply requests still landed on Dara's desk in the same slightly disorganized order they always had. On paper, everything was the same. But Corridor 9 was quiet in a way it had not been before. Empty in the way a place is empty after it has been holding something for a long time and finally lets it go. Oren was in the medical bay still, which Mira had extended on clinical grounds. There was real recovery work to do, nutritional and otherwise, and she was not about to rush it. He was sitting up most days now. He was eating properly. The large Davari eyes had lost the particular flatness that came from spending months trying not to hope too hard, and replaced it with something more careful. Not trust yet, but the possibility of trust, which was a beginning. Sori had not left his side. Dara came to the medical bay on a quiet afternoon. She pulled a chair to Oren's bedside and sat down without making a performance of it. Sori was curled at Oren's feet, scales cycling their slow blue-gold rhythm. The hum was very faint today, the way it was when everything was, for the moment, all right. Oren looked at her. He spoke through the translation interface Rail had set up on the bay's side table, his own language rendered into the station's common tongue. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Go ahead." "Why did you not walk past?" Dara thought about it. She did not give him the quick answer, because he deserved the real one. "I noticed the dragon first," she said, "and I could see that what it was doing was not what people said it was doing. Everyone said it was nesting, resting, instinct, but it was none of those things. It was on guard, and things that are on guard because of something." Oren looked at Sori, and that was enough. That was enough for me to start looking. The rest was just following what the numbers said. Other people saw the numbers. Other people saw them and thought they were close enough to normal. I thought close enough to normal was worth checking. He was quiet for a moment. Sori shifted, one wing extending slightly, and then folding back. A small, restless movement. The first Dara had seen the dragon make in weeks. Settling. Relaxing. Before the incident, Oren said, "When I first came to this station, I saw Sori in the transit hall. I stopped because," he paused, searching for the word, "because they were very small, and the hall was very large, and they were sitting alone and looking at everything with so much attention. I sat with them for a while. I did not think it meant anything." "It meant something to Sori," Dara said. "Yes." His voice through the interface was neutral, but his face was not. "When they took me to that room, I heard Sori outside the door within an hour. I thought it would leave. The next day it was still there. And the next. After a while he stopped. Started again. I would put my hand against the door sometimes, and I could feel the hum through the wall. And that was the only thing that told me that someone in the universe knew where I was." Dara did not say anything. Some things did not need a response. After a while she asked, "What does Sori's name mean?" "Rail told me, but I want to hear it again." Oren looked at the small dragon. Sori's head had lifted, amber eyes open, watching Oren with that absolute, unblinking attention. "The one who remains," Oren said. The hum rose slightly, brief and warm, like a hand on a shoulder. Dara stood up to leave. She had a quarterly review to finish and a cargo alignment to sort out before the end of shift, and the normal work of the station waited for her the way it always did, indifferent to drama and perfectly happy to pile up in her absence. At the door she paused, not because she planned to, just because she did. "For what it's worth," she said, without turning around, "you were not as forgotten as they wanted you to be. You had a witness too." She left the medical bay and walked down the main corridor toward logistics. The station moved around her, crew members carrying things, a maintenance bot dragging a supply cart, the background sound of a place doing its ordinary business. She went past the junction and down toward Corridor 9 out of habit more than intention. Old route. She had been walking it for weeks. Chamber 14's door was fully open now. The maintenance team had finished clearing it. Inside was just a plain gray room. Clean and plain and entirely ordinary, waiting to be assigned a new purpose. She glanced in as she passed. Nothing there. At the far end of the corridor, where the floor panel had the old scuff mark and the ventilation grate sat above, and the lighting was slightly dimmer than the rest of the station, Sori was sitting. Not in the ward hold position. Not coiled low and still, wings tucked, facing a door. Just sitting, upright, in the middle of the corridor, the way a person might sit in a place they had spent a long time and had no particular reason to hurry away from. The dragon looked at Dara as she walked toward it. Dara slowed down. She did not stop. She just walked at the pace of someone with nowhere urgent to be for one more moment. As she passed, Sori's scales shifted. The blue fell away entirely. Full gold, bright and clean, running from the tip of the nose to the end of the folded tail, lasting for one held second. Then the blue came back. The dragon looked away, down the corridor, at nothing in particular. Dara kept walking. Behind her, Corridor 9 was just a corridor. The room was just a room. The station was just a station, full of ordinary work and ordinary people doing the ordinary business of keeping things moving. But somewhere in the quiet behind her, a small dragon sat in a patch of corridor that still smelled, very faintly, like something that had been kept. And that, Dara thought, turning the corner toward logistics and the waiting stack of manifests and the rest of the ordinary day, was what mattered. Not the big gestures. Not the ones that got recorded in any official report. The small things. The ones that stayed.